What's up, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I'm your host, Chris. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys so much for your support these last couple weeks. Many of you may know my grandfather passed away, and we had his service last weekend. I appreciate the messages. I appreciate the support and love from all you guys. Um, it's been a trying couple weeks, but we got through it. I got to see my little sister before she went back to New Jersey. And the game keeps rolling on. So today's special guest, she is an attorney at law. She is a board member of the North Carolina Partnership for Children, the Smart Start. She's also the chair of Cabarrus County Child Protections and Fatality Team. So please help me welcome Paula Yost. Paula, how you doing?
Hi, Chris. I'm great. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for coming on, and I hope hopefully I didn't butcher your last name.
No, you got it great. Yost, that's absolutely right. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's dive into your story a little bit here. You hold the rare combination of being both an attorney and a licensed mental health clinician. How did those two paths come together for you?
Well, I was a lawyer first.
Hmm.
So I went to law school right after 9/11, actually. I was a senior in college on that actual September 11th, and the job market crashed. And a professor was like, "Why don't you go to law school?" So I did. 9 months later, I was in a law school classroom. And on the very first day of law school, they gave us the Myers-Briggs test, the personality test. If you're interested, you can take that test for free on the website 16personalities.com. And it's great because it's a career predictor. And 90% of my law school class was an ENTJ. That's like the letters that they give you in that test. And I
Hmm.
was not at all. The professor said, how many of you are something else? You're not an ENTJ. And I was like, right here. And he said, well, what are you? I said, I'm an ENFJ. And he said, well, you might be in the wrong class. You probably should be getting a master's in social work or mental health or theology or something like that. And I said, well, I'm here now. And I've done a lot of work to get here in a very short period of time. And my stubborn self is not leaving. So I finished law school, but then I started working and I realized that I was woefully unprepared. And quite frankly, I think that lawyers all across the country are woefully unprepared for the
Hmm.
things that we see. So much of what goes on in American courthouses is just mental health triage. North Carolina will tell you that 85% of our high conflict divorces either have a parent who is an addict or a personality disordered or both. And so I went back to grad school to get my master's in clinical mental health because I saw all of these mental health problems that I could not help because the law will only let you go but so far.
Right. And it's interesting that that's such a great career path to kind of go into each other because, like you said, the law can only get you so far with helping those people. So I can only imagine having that ability to help people with their mental health while also helping with the other part of that. I can't imagine that it feels, great to be able to help all the way across the board.
Yeah, there's a lot of value added in there.
Hmm.
Certainly, some of the time I'm particular about, okay, I'm going to be your lawyer or I'm going to be your therapist. I try not to mix the both in the same person, but
Hmm.
so often I have people come in and they feel like they need a legal consultation, but we really spend 5 minutes talking about the law and 55 minutes talking about their mental health. And I wind up referring them to a mental health clinician because they don't need a lawyer.
Hmm.
And in all honesty, lawyers are really expensive. I mean, the average lawyer in this country right now is somewhere between 295 and 495 an hour.
Wow.
Health insurance will pay for a lot of your mental health treatment. Even if you're cash pay for mental health treatment, you can usually find somebody for around 120.
Right.
So it's much cheaper to go see a mental health therapist than it is to go see a lawyer. But I think because of stigma, people don't want to go ask a mental health professional for help, but they're fine to go see a lawyer. So
Right.
a lot of times it's just important to be able to know, like, what do you need? Like, who
Hmm.
do you actually need to help you? What is the professional you're looking for?
Right. And, I think that's the most important part of what you do is, asking those questions and trying to get them to the correct path. Because, like you said, there is that stigma of people asking for help or even seeking out help. Um, I have a friend who, she struggles with mental health, and, I have resources at my disposal that I, give to her. But if you grow up with not being encouraged to talk about what you're going through, and you're internalizing all that stuff, it's like, yeah, you gave me the resources, but I don't feel comfortable seeing said therapist. And like you said, people are more likely to go to a lawyer and just cut ties instead of trying to work on their mental health or work on what they're going through.
Right. Well, and it's the same thing too. I mean, so often people go see doctors and
Hmm.
like medical doctors, and medical doctors are like, I can't find anything wrong with you.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably a mental health issue, or in many cases, a panic attack that you're just not recognizing that that's what it is.
Hmm.
I grew up in evangelical Christianity as well, and I struggled with clinical depression when I was in high school. I was actually, in retrospect, I probably needed some serious medication and therapy as a 17-year-old. And everyone was just like, well, you just need to pray it away. It's a
Hmm.
sign that your prayer life isn't strong enough. And I still say all the time, I was saved by an acceptance letter to Virginia Tech. That's literally what saved me. I was desperate to get out of the environment I was in on multiple fronts.
Hmm.
And the day that letter came in, and I knew I'm moving away, I'm going to live in the mountains for 4 years, and I'm going to be able to further my education at a school that I really want to be at. It
Right.
was like the sun came out.
Yeah.
And I will ever forever be thankful for Virginia Tech for that acceptance letter that hit my mailbox in 1997, because in many ways I think it saved my life.
And while I really appreciate the faith community as a whole, I think there's some extraordinary human beings, and I can appreciate having that value system of saying, pray your problems away. And, I totally understand that because I grew up with grandparents who had a belief system.
Yeah,
And, it didn't work for me because it wasn't something that I could really, I don't know, relate to, I guess.
yeah.
And I remember when my brother had his life taken away, a car accident, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, Jesus, 5 years ago. And at his service, I just remember the service wasn't really about him. It was just kind of like, talking about their beliefs, saying, God gives you depression, God this, God that. And it's like, listen, I get it. I understand and I appreciate it, but make the service about him. Like he gave his life to Jesus. Like it's so hard for me to like not be upset when I hear, pray your problems away kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, and I in no way argue that faith can be very important. It's
Hmm.
certainly very important, as you shared with your grandparents. It's very important to them. It's very important to people. I
Yeah.
remember when I was in grad school, we had a professor who said, do not mess with religious magic. You
Hmm.
meet your client where they are. No matter what your client's religious faith is, you let them hold that faith. However, education about the fact that depression is an illness. I
Yeah.
mean, nobody is being, I firmly disagree that God gives you depression or mental illness because he wants to punish you. I just don't think that's, or because he wants you to grow somehow. I just
Hmm.
don't think that God wants us to suffer. That
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me at
Hmm.
all. And so, I think what that does do is it fails to educate our population about things like the importance of therapy, and even more so the importance of medication. Like,
Right.
I don't believe that everyone needs to be on medication, but if we're doing like a depression screening, like a routine depression screening that scaled 0 to 10, and you're severely and profoundly depressed, like you're an 8 to 10, so you are either having active or passive suicidal thoughts, a lot of times therapy is not working
Right.
because you're so depressed that any tool I throw at you, you're just bouncing it right back, because there's this veil of depression that's between you and your therapist, and we can't get very far.
Right.
And usually with those people, if they go on even a low dose Like a medication like Prozac, like we know exactly what Prozac does. It's been on the market for decades. It's cheap. You can buy it for $4 at Walmart. Usually, just a low dose of Prozac will reduce your depression symptoms enough that therapy can work.
Yeah,
And so, we don't talk enough about the fact that if you just do nothing, like if you don't get any treatment for depression at all, it will usually resolve itself in about 9 months, assuming that you live that long.
right.
So, assuming that you're able to survive, and usually about, and I think that's what happened to me in high school, honestly. I had been clinically depressed for about 9 months. I got into Virginia Tech, and it gave me a reason to live, and it changed me. But if you have other forms of clinical depression, then things that tend to work are going to therapy, which will usually help you feel better in about 3 to 4 months, or going on medication, again, 3 to 4 months. But doing both together, clients see relief in 6 to 8 weeks. And so, if you can just access those types of treatments, I don't think that anyone in your life wants you to suffer. I
Right.
don't think that there's a huge benefit to suffering. No, your children don't want to see that. Your parents don't want to see that. Your spouse certainly doesn't want to see that. I mean, it has such a negative impact on everyone who loves you when
Hmm.
you suffer needlessly for months and months when there is help available.
Right. And you had brought something up that I really want to highlight there, and that's that therapy doesn't always work, right? It's
Right.
therapy is not for everybody.
No,
And sometimes it's okay to explore the medicine side of getting help. Now,
absolutely.
while I agree that there are plenty of doctors who will just give you medicine just to give you medicine
Right.
and will treat a symptom and not the cause,
Right.
there are, in the same token, good doctors that will say, okay, this is the root cause of why you're feeling this way,
Yes.
and we are going to give you this. You're going to take it for this short amount of time. And like, I'll give you a good example. My mom had really bad anxiety. Like, she was on Xanax probably since she was like 13 all the way to her 50s. In reality, I don't think the human body is supposed to be consuming Xanax for that long.
They're not.
And unfortunately, she grew up in that generation of, take a pill and you gotta take it for the rest of your life. And being educated now, we know
Yeah.
that's not the case.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have clients who I always tell people, look, first of all, I don't like medications like Xanax, to be honest with you. I
Same.
don't like anything that makes you overly sleepy. I
Hmm.
would prefer things that are in that Prozac Paxil house. I have had some clients with some, Zoloft, that house of drugs. I don't think that Zoloft works as well as Prozac or Paxil. I see lots of young women get put on Zoloft because it doesn't have negative interferences with pregnancy, but a
Hmm.
lot of young girls aren't trying to get pregnant anyway. Just because you're of childbearing age doesn't mean you don't deserve your depression to be treated appropriately.
Right.
But there shouldn't be a bunch of shame and stigma attached to medication. If you're clinically depressed, then sometimes medication really does help. I would never tell someone with diabetes, you don't need that insulin shot. That's not
Hmm.
a helpful thing to tell people. We need to recognize it as the disease it is.
Yeah.
I also want to talk for a minute too about therapy doesn't always work. Sometimes it doesn't work for the reasons we've already talked about because you are so clinically depressed that you're not able to have therapy penetrate the cloud of depression that you're already under. But
Hmm.
the other reason it doesn't work is because sometimes your therapist is not a good fit for you.
Yep.
So there are different types of therapists. And I want to add, I am not everybody's cup of tea. There are therapists that are very Rogerian in nature. And what that means is that they are very nurturing, loving, and validating, right? I tend to be a little bit more of a confrontational therapist. And by that, I mean, I'm never going to be mean to you, but I don't feel like I'm doing you a good service if it's obvious to me why you're not or why you're struggling a lot. Like if I have the client who is drinking 3/4 of a bottle of wine every single day, I'm probably not going to call that out in the first meeting, but at some point, I'm going to try to talk to you about cessing your substance use because
Yeah.
it's not good for you and it's leading to the totality of your problems.
Hmm.
There are clients who will not respond to my style But there are also clients who will not respond to a Rogerian therapist because they know that's deep down, that's not what they need.
Yeah.
So if you go in with a therapist and you're like, I do not like this person,
Mhm.
find someone else.
Yep.
Like, you don't have to apologize to your therapist for not liking them. We've been trained that we're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I accept that. I
Mhm.
don't care whether you like me or not. I care that you find someone who can help you get better
Right.
because fundamentally, I don't want you to die.
Yeah.
Suicidology is very, very real. And I don't want to see anyone suffer that way.
Same.
I have suffered that way. I have lost people in my life to suicide. I
Hmm.
don't want to see anyone fundamentally suffer. There
Yeah.
is always help. You just might have to work really hard depending on your area to get it.
Yeah.
I also want to talk for a minute too about Headway. So I am not getting any kind of kickback from this, but Headway is an online counseling service, and there are
Mhm.
more and more online counseling services that are poking up. They work great for people in rural areas or for people in populated areas where there's just no resources available. If every therapist in your community has an 8 to 9 month wait list for in-person mental health treatment, then if you're literally dying here, please try something like Headway or online mental health. You'll be shocked at how many therapists you'll find who don't have office space and who want to work from home. And in many cases, Zoom actually does work great, especially if you're under 40. I used to really poo-poo online therapy. I was like, that's never going to work. I can't read somebody's body language. And then I went to this counseling conference where Dr. Irvin Yalom, who is literally 90 years old, he's like the father of existential therapy. He was literally like, do not underestimate this. Like, it absolutely works for people who are under 40 because they grew up with the internet. And so it 100% works for them. And so, by all means, like if you live in a rural area where you have an access problem, look online. You might actually find someone really wonderful who can see you tomorrow.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to give out resources for people that feel like there's no hope. And you touched on something else that I think is always important to remember is it's okay to have several different therapists before you find the right fit.
Yes.
Um, Speaking from my own experience, therapy takes a lot of work, and I think that's another reason why some, not all, some of the people that say therapy doesn't work, some of those people might be the people that don't want to put in the work, that don't want to
Yes.
hold up the mirror to their face and be accountable. Um,
Yes.
you had
That,
mentioned that your methodology is, kind of holding people accountable for some of their choices. And while some people might not respond to that, that's what a lot of people need, in my opinion, is that accountability.
yes. Another thing that I really work on with my client is controlling your thoughts.
Hmm.
For so many years of my own life, I was just a victim of my own thoughts. Whatever my brain was over here telling me, I was like, well, that's the truth because I think it, I feel it. Well, that's not true. Just because you think a thought doesn't mean it's right.
Hmm.
Your brain just chatters all the time. And to be honest with you, the smarter a person is, the higher their IQ is, the more their brain is constantly talking and doesn't give them any relief some of the
Yeah.
time. So, really being able to focus on like, the idea of meditation is not to empty your thoughts. I've never in my life had a moment where my brain was totally quiet. That is not the goal. The goal is to be able to watch what is my brain saying to me. I have clients who come in. I had one gentleman once, but I think this analogy works for a lot of people. He was just brokenhearted.
Hmm.
This woman that he was madly in love with had ended their relationship, and his heart was destroyed. And he was badly depressed because his heart was broken. He was sad. And I asked him, I said, how many times a day are you thinking thoughts about this woman? He was like, I don't know. I feel like I think about her all the time. I was like, all right, here's what I want you to do. You're going to go home tonight. You're going to get an index card or a post-it note or hell, a dinner napkin. I don't care. Get something that you can write on with a little pencil, like what you would carry around on a mini golf course. And every time you think about this woman, I want you to take a tick mark. And at the end of a 24-hour period, we're going to give you credit for however many hours you were asleep. We're going to subtract that out. You are going to tell me how many times a day you thought about this person. And it was ridiculous. I mean, it was like he was thinking about this woman like 10 times an hour. And I was like, dude, you're thinking about this girl every 6 minutes. So were you thinking about her every 6 minutes when you were dating her? And he was like, honestly, no. And I'm like, is it healthy to think about anyone every 6 minutes? No. So then we started working on cessating that. Like, how can we literally start thinking about this person less? Number one. And number two, how can we work on things like, okay, we're going to think about them for this period of time and that's going to be it. Or if they're in our thoughts pervasively and it's just ruminating, what else can we find to do?
Hmm.
Because sometimes I'm like, okay, if you're having this problem, go for a walk, go for a run. If you're drinking something hot, drink some ice water, pour that down. Honestly, find a book, find a
Yeah.
movie. You know, if you know you love Jean-Claude Van Damme movies from the 90s, no matter how bad they are, go watch that. But literally do anything you can do to distract yourself from ruminating broken heart thoughts. That doesn't help you
Yeah.
because it makes your brain tired. And then when
Hmm.
your brain's tired, your brain's overly active and not sleeping, which leads to anxiety, which leads to depression.
Yeah.
And then you're in a hole you can't get out of without medicine or therapy. The goal
Hmm.
is to not wind up there in the first place.
Right. And grounding and coping mechanisms are just so great for your soul, you know.
Yes.
I remember when I had my first panic attack, and this was when I was trying to look for new therapist when I came back down here to Florida. Um, and she was really bad. You know, it was a bad match. And I'd like sharing this story because, again, going back to it's okay to look for several different therapists.
Mhm.
Um, Mid panic attack, she cut me off and said, "That's all the time we have." Like, didn't try to calm me down, nothing at all. She asked me if I was willing to take medicine. I was not depressed, or well, not let me not say I wasn't depressed. I wasn't at a level where I felt like I needed medicine. And I said, "Well, I'm not really big on medicine. I don't think I need medication." And then she says, "Well, if you had a heart disease or if you had a high blood pressure, would you take medicine?" I'm like, "Well, of course, it's for my health." And then she just kind of like, "Well, this is for your health." And I'm like, "Oh, it's this kind of session. I'm good." Um, but I think finding those methods of grounding yourself is the very first step I would go to getting yourself in a calm state because I'm very guilty of negative self-talk sometimes. And like you said,
Oh,
chatter,
yeah.
chatter, chatter,
Shall
right?
always.
hmm And that's when the coping comes in. It's being with nature is I love seeing sunsets, and it's really big for me. Um, Writing stuff down. I have a whole box here full of affirmations that I do every single day,
Love it.
and I have it till the end of the year, and it helps me a lot because it's like, oh, I fell behind like 2 days. Okay, name some good things that happened on this day. I'm like, oh yeah, that was really cool that happened.
That's right.
It retrains your brain when you say enough good things.
That's
Obviously, you look in the mirror and say, hey, today's gonna be a great day. Maybe it's
that's
a
right.
bad day,
That's
but
right.
if you keep doing it over and over,
That's
your
right.
your brain is rewired.
It doesn't help our brain to wallow. It really
Hmm.
doesn't. It doesn't help us to wallow in grief. It doesn't help us to wallow in sadness. I mean, and don't get me wrong, there's a time for mourning. There's a time for, all of our emotions are important, but you don't want to find yourself being in a state where you're never experiencing happiness or joy or anything to that effect. That's not helpful for us at all. And
Right.
so you're exactly right that being able to retrain our mind, tell our mind something different, that's really, really helpful to help us come a long way with feeling
Yeah.
better.
And I wrote this question down specifically because of the lawyer part of what you do and also the clinician part. You often work at the intersection of trauma, family systems, and legal process. What do you wish more people understood about how trauma shows up in courtrooms?
Oh, goodness, that's an excellent question. I think people don't understand the fact that people who have trauma tend to be the people who have a very explosive reaction, right? So they're people who are oftentimes screaming, yelling, they're acting erratically. They're not often doing that because they're trying to be jerks. they're doing that because of trauma. They also tend to be people who seem like they cannot tell a consistent story. A, B, C, and then D happened, and then E happened. So let me give you two different examples. One is a very good friend of mine. His adverse childhood experience score. I hope everyone listening to you already knows what an ACE score is. If you don't, definitely look up adverse childhood experiences. But his adverse childhood experiences score is a 10. And he has come a long way. I mean, when I first knew him, we were in high school together, and he was a raging drug addict. And he is now a 48-year-old man who really has his stuff together. And he's been clean and sober for a solid 15 years. But if you put him in an environment like the airport and something goes awry and he gets triggered, it's not going to be a good day.
Hmm.
So, like, he gets into a fight with the TSA agent about his belt buckle, and then he gets triggered, and the trauma response starts, and somebody's not going to get on that plane that day.
Hmm.
We see, and who's otherwise a very mentally stable survivor of an individual, nobody's going to have perfection.
Right.
Another example is our sexual assault victim. So, victims of sexual assault dissociate in their brain as a method of being able to handle that trauma. So, when we see them in court and they are asked about their experience, they often cannot tell that story the way you and I are having a conversation because their brain has literally blocked parts of it out so
Hmm.
that they can survive. So
Right.
you'll hear stories like I'll sit down with someone sometimes and I'm trying to get a story from them. I also see this in victims of domestic violence where I'm trying to get a story from like what happened and they're talking so fast and I can't get a word in unless I interrupt and stop them and say, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. I need you to back up for me." And you really do have to work with that and be patient. And that's how my counseling training really, really helps. Lawyers do not get that type of training in law school. Very rarely do we get taught how to handle trauma victims. And
Hmm.
honestly, it's a true disservice to society as a whole because so many people do have trauma.
Hmm.
At this point in my career, I tell most people the best thing you can do is avoid the judicial system. Like, if law enforcement is getting called to your location, things have gone too far. Anything you can do to avoid that is good. I
Yeah.
see the court system re-victimizing trauma victims a lot.
Yeah.
And I also will add, despite all those horrible things I just said, I am starting to see law schools that are beginning to create dual enrollment programs. So dual PsyD, JD programs, dual JD, like JD MBAs have been around for years and years and years. But I'm finally starting to see law schools create other programs that are mental health focused. And
Hmm.
if you are a young person who is interested in exploring law or mental health or going to grad school, if you can find one of those programs where you can do them together, I think that is amazing. Most lawyers will tell you that the third year of law school is kind of arguably a waste of time anyway. And because of the expense of law school, a lot of people just think we shouldn't have the third year anymore. That third year, I don't even care if your law school is not a PsyD program. That third year of law school needs to be riddled with classes about trauma-informed care and psychopathology.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned, kind of re-traumatizing the people that are going to court that went through domestic or sexual assault or whatever it is. Because I remember when I was about 14, I think I had an incident with my mom and her boyfriend at the time. She wanted me to testify on, stuff that she was making up. Just
Yeah,
as a background, my mom, severely narcissistic person. Didn't know that too much when I was growing up because we were
we
never
raised
taught what a
them.
narcissist is, right?
Right.
Um, and I just remember sitting outside the courtroom and he's walking down the hall and he just kind of looks at me disappointed. That's burned in the back of my brain for the rest of my life because she was lying. And as a child, it's like, I know I think she's lying, but I can't prove she's lying because I'm a kid. Nobody's going to believe me.
Right.
And I think it's really important that you brought up that the court system, the judicial system as a whole, can re-traumatize people. Whether that's
Ab-
divorce court,
Absolutely.
custody. You know.
Divorce, custody, criminal, like
Hmm.
crime victims often. I mean, you go to court trying to get help, and then this person shows up. Well, I need time to hire an attorney. And then a judge continues it and continues it. And I've also seen people, especially in child custody cases, the mom and dad will each lawyer up. And each of them will spend somewhere between ten and $50,000 on lawyers.
Mm.
And a year later, they're in pretty much the same situation they were in when the whole thing started.
Yeah.
And so, what I tend to recommend that people in that scenario do is, you know what, go to mediation. Honestly, try mediation first because many times you can find a really good mediator who can help you figure out a plan or also ask for parent coordination. So, not every state has this, but in North Carolina, where I live, you can get assigned a parent coordinator who's basically an attorney who is here to settle your disputes without you going to court every
Yeah.
time. So essentially, I've been appointed as a parent coordinator before for mom and dad.
Mm.
And mom and dad get into fights all the time about stuff like, okay, son's birthday is on a Tuesday. Who's going to be able to spend, what are we doing for son's birthday? Because we hate each other and can't be mature enough to be around one another. So if mom wants to be around son in the morning and dad wants to be around him in the afternoon, or we want to throw him two birthday parties and they can't get along, my job is to come in and say, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have this kid's birthday from this time to this time. You're going to be there, and then he's going to get picked up by grandma and driven to this house and then have a birthday party from this time to this time. So it still isn't a good situation because it's
Yeah.
bad for your kid. I
Sure.
mean, I guess it's in the eyes of the kid. Like now he's getting two birthday parties. I guess it depends on how he views that. But essentially, it stops mom and dad from wasting a college education. I mean,
Mm.
literally, there are people right now who their kid is now 18 and has no money to continue their education or go to a trade school. And mom and dad spent that whole money when they were 10 years old fighting with each other.
Right. Yeah.
And mom and
And
dad have no retirement now either. They're just
mhm.
cleaned out.
Right.
Like lawyers can find other ways to make money. I promise you. There's no shortage of ways for lawyers to make money.
Right. And you brought up something that I would love to speak to, the two birthday thing, right? My parents got divorced when I was about 8 years old. And 8 years old, you're at the age where you understand that mom and dad aren't together anymore. And your siblings aren't quite old enough to remember what it was like to have two parents together. Um, from 8 years old, so that's 2000 to right now. My parents still to this day cannot get along, cannot have a civil conversation. Um, it's very toxic. They can't be anywhere near each
Yes.
other. Um,
It's
and I remember,
irritating to the
yeah,
children.
hmm
It's really irritating. They don't want to hear about it.
yeah, and I remember growing up. It's like, man, I just want a Christmas with them together again. I just want a birthday with them together again. I don't want to do two different birthdays. I don't want to go an hour this way and an hour that way. And the tug of war part is exhausting.
And that only happens because they can't get along. And
Exactly.
there again, that's it. But you also gave me an important piece of information earlier, which was you said your mom's a narcissist.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, in these high conflict families, that is what we see so often. Like most cases that need a parent coordinator, it's because they can't get along. If we look at ACE scores, getting a divorce is absolutely something that gives children a point in their adverse childhood experiences. But not every child of divorce has a horrible outcome. Sometimes mom and dad are able to honor what they had together and just say, you know what? We don't belong together in a relationship, but we are going to get along for the limited amount of time we have to be around one another for the sake of our kids. People who are able to get it together and co-parent their kids effectively have the
Hmm.
best overall outcomes.
Yeah.
They really do. But it's the stuff that goes on with the high conflict divorce because so often it's not just the divorce, it's the other things that mom and dad are doing in that house that are upping the overall tension of the house that
Yeah.
is causing their children to experience a lot of the adverse consequences.
Yeah, and when they come from a generation of mental illness is not talked about or properly diagnosed, on
Yes.
top of the drugs that they grew up around, mix all that together on top of medication you said you were supposed to take for the rest of your life, it implodes, and the amount of times I've had authorities, Paula, come to my house and police officers saying, you're the most mature person in your household. That's not a compliment, by the way.
It's not.
You
It's
know?
not. And it's not. I mean, that's not good for anyone. That's
Yeah.
not good for the family as a whole. And like I can really relate to this too. Like I wrote some about my mom's family in her book, and I'm sure I'm gonna have relatives that are angry at me for what I wrote. And I would like to add that I don't care at this point in my life. I really don't care. I don't care if we don't talk again. It doesn't bother me. But my grandfather on my mom's side was a raging alcoholic. I mean, he would probably be able to drink a 24 pack of Coors Light in a day and have
Sheesh.
zero impact. I mean, this man was an addict from the time he was in high school until the day he died in his late 70s. I mean, he was just always a hardcore alcoholic.
Hmm.
And he and my grandmother on that side, they were the couple that brought out the worst in one another. They got married and divorced multiple times. They would have a kid, get divorced, have another kid, get divorced again, and then have a kid. And they subjected all of their children to ridiculous levels of domestic violence. Like my grandmother shot him. She shot him in the balls. And he was in the hospital, and the doctors are out there trying to talk to my mom about the fact that her mom literally just shot her dad. And his response to that was, I was glad I was drunk when that happened. They moved in together after that. Like they
Oh no.
reconciled. They got back together after that. And we wonder why my mom has a personality disorder.
Uh-huh.
That's why. We wonder why she fears abandonment and has attachment issues and can't apologize for anything. That
Hmm.
right there is it. And like I think that my mom loves me as much as she can, but being able to overcome that is a lot. And all I know is I'm ferreting out that level of generational trauma, which
Hmm.
is why I say I don't care if it means we don't talk anymore. I'm not having that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be boozing around my kids. I'm not going to be cussing my husband around my kids. Like, if you hear me talk to my children about their father, they're going to hear what a hero he is.
Yeah.
Even if I'm mad at him, even if he and I are having a bad day, my kids are not going to know that because that's not fair to them. They
Yeah.
don't want to hear it. I don't
Hmm.
want to hear people talk crap about my dad to me, so I'm not going to do that to my kids.
Yeah.
And that breaking generational curses
Yes.
is
Yes.
is what we're here to do.
Hmm. And that's the most gratifying part of healing, of bettering ourselves, right? Is breaking those cycles that were presented in front of us from generations of trauma and growing up around addicts myself and mental illness, having kids very young and not being prepared to raise those kids. Like realistically, nobody's really ready to raise kids, right? You're
No.
not given a manual,
No.
but it's your responsibility as an adult when you have those kids to not repeat cycles that destroyed you as a person.
Right. And if you're a listener, I would really encourage you to go look at those adverse childhood experiences. That chart, there's a
Mhm.
PDF of it that's readily available online, and just familiarize yourself with that. First of all, it helps you know your own score. And so it helps you figure out yourself. But the
Mhm.
other thing it does is it's a guidebook. Like I keep that thing in my mind whenever I'm frustrated and I'm like, all right, how am I going to make sure that my children have an A score that is 3 or less? Because I don't want them to have a 10 because then they grow up having that trauma that they have to deal with for the rest of their lives. I also want to add too, if you're listening to this and you do what I just said and you take the ACE score and you get something horrible, like you are the person with a 10, that doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're hopeless. It doesn't mean all the horrible things that we talk about that happens to people like heart disease, stroke, diabetes. That does not mean it has to be your future. It means that you need some extra care and love and attention
Yeah,
because you didn't get parented the way you deserved to be parented, and you're going to have to reparent yourself.
yeah,
So you're going to have to really make some healthy lifestyle choices more than the average person because you're going to have to really work at overcoming that. But it can be done.
yeah,
It can absolutely be done. And that is honestly the magic of being an adult is you can reparent yourself. You can create another reality for yourself beyond what you were given.
I think one of the greatest things my therapist ever said to me was, I'm that person for everybody else that I wish I had growing up.
Absolutely.
And it's
Absolutely.
important that we uplift each other, support each other no matter what that means. And I truly feel that accountability goes a long way and being there for people. And that's another thing I want to point out is being there for somebody doesn't mean just, uh, talk to them, just say, how are you doing? Like, actually listen. Like, if you're asking somebody how they're doing, listen. Don't respond. Just listen. Be like, hey, how's everything going? Like, do you want to talk about it? Don't give advice. And I think that's the number one thing that us as humans struggle with is when we're trying to listen to somebody, we're listening to respond and not to understand what they're going through.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's a skill.
Hmm.
That's really a skill, and it takes practice to do that. And I'll just say too, if you catch yourself going down that road, you can always stop yourself and back yourself up and just say, "I'm sorry. I don't want to make this about me."
Yeah.
You know. And sometimes you never know either. Sometimes people are like, "No, what you're saying is helpful."
Hmm.
But I think it's always good to just show that respect, to be able to say, I really want to be empathetic with what you're saying to me,
Right.
and just let people know that you support them.
Yeah. You had mentioned that you said you had written a book, correct? What was the title of it again?
It is called Tumbleweeds. And so
Tumbleweeds.
it is available on Amazon.com. And my book basically talks about my kids. I've had some issues with special needs mother, or I am a special needs mother, but I'm also an adoptive mother. I was actually my daughter's court-appointed child advocate. And when she aged out of foster care, she came to live with me. And so we talk a lot in that book about trauma and overcoming trauma and what it really takes. If you see a foster child who is in care, they have been through it. By very nature of the fact that you are in foster care, you have been through it. And so I talk a lot in my book about what those people need in order to thrive, because I believe that all of them can. I believe that all of us are salvageable, as long as we have at least one stable adult who loves us and believes in us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that one positive influence in our life could, change the trajectory of us growing up. For me, it was my teacher in elementary school that I'm still very close with to this day. Um, I am convinced that she was my guardian angel since the day I met her. Um, when my parents first got divorced and we had I don't remember if it was a parent teacher conference or maybe it was just parents meeting the teachers, but it was the first time my parents weren't together, and she went out of her way to make sure I was okay because I was the one who understood that mom and dad aren't together anymore. And she taught me how to tie my shoes. Like, she was
Yeah.
arguably one of the greatest human beings in my entire life.
Yeah. Those people
Um,
are the change makers.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so often we see that when mom's not able to be the person we need them to be, or we have kids that get really attached to teachers.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can think of multiple teachers in my life who I was getting what I needed at school. But that's also an important thing too, because then summer comes
yeah.
and then the next year we have a different teacher. And that
Hmm.
bond is really important.
Yeah. I remember when I went to middle school, the first thing I did when we had a day off or, whatever it was, and my sister or brother would still be in elementary school, I would go and see her, just I would
Yeah.
always revisit her. And
Yeah.
every now and again we'll get together for dinner and we'll just talk for hours. And, she's a incredible human being. So
Everybody
having,
needs that,
yeah, yeah, I couldn't
especially
agree
kids
more.
who don't have that in their parents.
Hmm. Yeah. And what's funny about that is my mom actually hated her for that reason.
I'm sure. I'm sure she did. I'm sure she did.
Yeah,
That totally tracks.
it
Hmm.
does. I remember her saying that I thought more of Teresa, my teacher, than I thought of my own mom. And I didn't respond, even though it was true. But it's
Yep.
like, I mean, hey,
Well, yeah, and the narcissist is always going to victim rescue persecutor and is never going to be able to sit and self-reflect upon why that might be. Why might
exactly,
my child be more attached to their teacher than they are to me? But
exactly.
in most cases, your child's got a darn good reason for that.
Yep. Um, Where I lost my spot here. Your county had identified homelessness, domestic violence, mental health, and lack of awareness as core threats to children. Which of these do you see rising most quickly and why?
Oh gosh. My county is really interesting in the sense that we are one of the 10 fastest growing counties in America. When
Wow.
I was a child, so I've lived well, I went away to college, but I've lived in Cabarrus County, North Carolina from, my birth until now, excluding those years when I was in school. But even then, I was a resident here. When I was little, we had a population of 50,000 and we had five high schools. Now we have a population of like 260,000 and we have 10 high schools. But
Wow.
our infrastructure has really not gotten any bigger. And North Carolina has basically become a gigantic suburb. Like people are growing here, are moving here every single day from
Hmm.
the West Coast, where because we don't have, so far, we don't have a ton of forest fires. Taxes have been in the past low. Those things are not the case anymore, but
Hmm.
they were for a long time. I don't know that I would say any of those particular problems have gotten like worse, but I think the magnitude of what I'm seeing is worse. So, for
Yeah.
instance, homelessness among children. Since COVID happened, the homeless numbers of kids in my area have, I mean, I'm not doubled or quadrupled. Like they have like inflated. Like I see kids living in tents. I see kids living in cars at the NASCAR track. Like there's campgrounds all around the NASCAR track, and they are full of homeless families. There are tent cities around. Um, in many cases, it's not that those parents are abusive or neglectful, it's just poverty. They're
Hmm.
just living in poverty. And those are the children that make me very nervous too, because those are the kids that are likely to be trafficked. Those are the kids that some pervert is likely to prey on them. And then that just makes the overall situation that they're already experiencing so much worse.
Yeah.
So the homelessness is a problem. And I think I don't think it's a failure to understand what trauma is. I think almost everyone can have some idea in their mind of what trauma is. Everyone understands if you get sexually assaulted, if, you grow up without food, if your house catches fire, everyone understands that those are traumas. The
Hmm.
problem is that I don't think people understand how to be compassionate and how to treat the trauma, right? So they don't know what to do then when someone who's, to me, obviously a trauma victim is now spewing trauma. They
Hmm.
don't know how to respond to that. And that's what we've got to teach the public to do. Like somebody who's just suddenly mad for seemingly no reason, that's a trauma trigger. And
Hmm.
you're not doing yourself or them favors to argue with them to make it worse. Like learn how to de-escalate that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
I did a podcast earlier this week where I talked about foster care. And one of the things we talked about was what do you do when the teenage foster kid is acting a fool? They're cussing at you, they're spitting, they're doing whatever they're doing. I'm like, walk away. As long as they're not hurting, like assaulting you or damaging property, walk away. Go to another part of the house, make them dinner, do their laundry. Give them an hour, come back, and just say to them, hey, I made supper. Would you like to eat? Hey, I cleaned your clothes. Here's a clean towel. And so often, those children have never had anyone take care of them at all.
Yeah.
They've had to take care of their parents. And so they've never had anyone show them one shred of kindness. And they know it's not like they don't know that they were escalating.
Hmm.
So if you can give them time to come down and you can come back to them with some love,
Hmm.
that builds rapport over time. Where
Yeah.
what you'll see is those outbursts are going to happen less frequently. And then when they do happen, there's going to be more relationship repair. And so I also think we cannot overemphasize the importance of relationship repair. What so many adult children with a narcissist or a borderline for a parent never got is somebody to simply say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry you feel the way you do. I'm sorry I wasn't healed myself so I could be the parent that you needed.
Right.
Not, well, this is your fault because you blah, blah, blah. Or I'm sorry, but you were horrible to deal with. Or I'm sorry, but I just wasn't a good mother, I guess. That's not
I've
helpful.
heard that one so many times.
So many times. That is not helpful.
Yeah.
And what it does is it creates an apology ache. So many children just want you to be able to own up to it.
Yep.
I tell my kids all the time, if I get too angry, if I get too upset, if I respond impatiently, I try to go back to my children and say, look, I'm sorry.
Hmm.
I was tired. I was hungry. I was impatient. Or I was irritated because you told me you needed a poster board for school at 8:45 at night and I really want to go to bed. I was impatient and I don't want to be that way with you, but here's what we can do to make this better in the future.
Yeah.
And then let's move on. But you can't move on and just act like nothing happened
Hmm.
because then you've got an adult child who's carrying around 46 years of never getting a bona fide apology and they'll write you off.
Yeah.
That's why we have this estrangement situation happening in America now.
Yeah. So there's a couple things there. Number one being when I started therapy, I discovered the word love bombing. I didn't know
Oh,
what that was. And then I experienced it from my mom. Come to find out that was my whole childhood of, her calling me names, followed up by I love you and I'm sorry. Fake apology, right?
yeah.
Um,
And so confusing for you about what love is.
yeah. And I remember I hated that word for so long, for
Yeah.
so long. And it took my friend that I lost at 21, uh, to say I love you enough times that I say it to my friends, and I say it to people I care about and mean it. I hated that word. I hated the word love for so long because of my mom. And the other thing I wanted to point out, you said something about de-escalating. I don't know if you are familiar with her or not. Her name is Tiffany Herring. She is in Pitt County and she works with NAMI.
Oh, wow. Okay. I need to meet her.
Um, yeah, she wrote a book called De-escalation,
Okay.
and she works with the Pitt County Sheriff, teaching them how to de-escalate people that they are dealing with. So if they're going to a domestic violence, situation at a house, they de-escalate, and they have de-escalation units and stuff that she helped train. If you've never heard of her, I highly recommend getting in touch with her. She's brilliant.
We're gonna have to do that for sure.
Yeah, I'll give you her contact information after. Um,
Awesome.
but I think the de-escalation part is such a powerful and underrated skill to have because walking away is the hardest thing to do for anybody. Um, for me, I think just because I was in survival mode for so long that I kind of taught myself to walk away from my
Yeah.
mom when her and I would get into an argument or something. That it wasn't working at some point because she just has to constantly, create
Follow.
a situation. Right, follow, right.
Yeah.
And I
That's how she's
remember,
getting power. That's the
yeah.
power and control.
Hmm. And I remember the very last fight that we had when I was in New Jersey. This is like 2018. And she spent 3 hours tearing me down, calling me every name you could possibly call me. I didn't get one word in. And that was the camel that was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was de-escalating wasn't working, coping with my environment wasn't working. That's when I started therapy. And I spent 2 sessions, both an hour long, just crying.
Yeah.
And, as a man, you're not told to cry. You're not told to share your feelings, right? And before I made the decision to come back down here to Florida, the therapist up there had said, when I first met you, I couldn't see you. Like you would look down, we couldn't look eye to eye for a really long time. My last session, she's like, I could see you for who you are now, and I could see so much strength in you. And it gave me the strength to leave. And, my mom and I relationship hasn't been the same ever since. I keep her very far away from me.
And the sad reality is that for the personality disordered individual who doesn't want to do the work to get better, children like us will never have a normal relationship with them.
Right.
What we will have is a relationship that must be managed,
Yep.
if we choose to have one at all. But if we choose to have one, you just have to radically accept that this is the way that it is. And
Yep.
it's not going to be different and it's not going to be better. This is simply the way that it is. And that's sad.
Yeah.
It's definitely sad. It's definitely something worth grieving. But I take a lot of solace in knowing that I'm not going to make my children feel that way. Like
Yeah.
I'm a mother of three boys. My daughter is adopted, but my kids are three boys. I don't ever want one of my sons to have to feel the way you just described yourself feeling. Because first of all, I don't want to put my sons through a 3 hour festival of me screaming at them. I can't imagine me doing that in the first place. Why would I? Why would I have that much pent up effort that I need to unload? And if I did do something to them that hurt them, that goes back to let's have relationship repair.
Yeah.
I don't want to have a horrible situation with my children.
Right.
And I don't want them to love me out of obligation or to feel that they need to care for me out of obligation.
Hmm.
I want them to live their own lives and feel supported and loved in doing that.
Yeah. And, I want to throw this out there for not only the listeners, but, just for this conversation in general. And that's forgiving not only yourself for having to put up with what you put up with, but forgiving them for yourself, not for
Yep.
them. And to piggyback on that, accept the apology that you know you will never get.
Yep.
And you spoke to it earlier. We wish they were more compassionate, more empathetic to how they were treating us. And unfortunately, like you had mentioned, we have to accept people for the way that they are.
Yeah. Not their
Not all
potential, not what we
right,
want, but the way,
right.
but reality. Living in reality is hard sometimes.
Yeah. Um, so for someone navigating a legal issue while also dealing with mental health challenges, what is the first step you think makes the biggest difference?
I think therapy, and I think every lawyer would say that. Lawyers who deal with clients that are actively in therapy versus lawyers who deal with clients that are not, there's a huge difference. You
Hmm.
know, lawyers will often wake up to emails that are just like swiping multiple times, 4 pages. And when we read through them, there's nothing that we can do to help you. We cannot help you with the fact that your ex sent you a nasty text message or said something hurtful. Yes, sometimes you could take out criminal charges, but if they're not threatening to kill you or hurt you, they're just harassing you. At some point, that gets into that cycle of the law making it worse. And so often, if you can work those issues out with a therapist, it's going to be cheaper and better for you in the long run.
Yeah,
Let your lawyer practice law, let your mental health clinician practice therapy.
yeah. So I asked this question to all of my guests, but kind of try to change around the words a little bit for every guest. If you could change one thing about how society approaches mental health, what would it be?
Just better information.
Yeah.
I think we are so uninformed and we're so quick to just write people off like schizophrenics. People are so quick to write you off if you have schizophrenia. Invega is 93% effective. There are so many people who, if we just get them the right routine of medication treatment, they can have a normal life or at
Hmm.
least a semi-normal life, but we write people off
Yeah.
and we treat them like trash.
Right.
And I get that sometimes you're seeing trauma and you're like, whoa, why is this person coming at me? But again, if you de escalate, just lack of information.
Yeah. I think not only is the education part very important, but also getting the correct diagnosis, instead of self-diagnosing, right?
Right. Yes, Chat GPT and Google do not need to be, they do not need to be your doctor nor your lawyer.
Right. Yeah. Um, I want to bring this gentleman up because I thought it was pretty incredible that, well, not incredible, sad, but incredible that he is where he is now. I believe he said he was 52 years old and he was living 30 years with the wrong diagnosis. They said he had anxiety, depression, went through, trials and trials of medication. And within the last 2 years, they finally gave him a diagnosis and he was schizophrenic. And I
Yeah.
said, man, I can't even imagine
Right.
like living that long. Be like,
The
why is none of this
anxiety,
helping me?
right. The anxiety and the depression was a symptom of the untreated schizophrenia.
Yeah. And kind of going back to the treating the symptom and not the cause conversation. And just kind of attaching that to the self-diagnosing thing, just because you say you have depression or anxiety doesn't necessarily mean that's what's wrong with, no, I don't want to say that's what's wrong with you.
Right.
That's what you're struggling with.
It can be the symptom, not the problem. And I see that a lot in the autism spectrum community too,
Hmm.
especially in young women who haven't been diagnosed with autism spectrum.
Yeah.
They are frequently depressed and anxious because they can't read facial expressions or social cues. And so they feel completely lost because
Yeah.
women are socialized to be able to do all of those things.
Hmm.
And not to say that males don't struggle as well, but for females, that definitely leads to tremendous anxiety and depression. And often that's what leads to their autism being diagnosed.
Right. So before we get to the quote that closes out the podcast, where can our listeners find you?
So I am on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn as Paula J. Yost author. And then I have a website, which is PaulaJyostauthor.com. And of course, you can find my book, Tumbleweeds, on Amazon.com.
Perfect. I'll be sure to include all of that in the episode. So before I read my quote, do you have any closing words for our listeners?
I think I would just tell everyone that there's always hope.
Yeah.
There's always hope. Even if you feel like there's not hope, there's always hope. And so don't try to overwhelm yourself by looking at the end result. Focus on like what is a small thing that I can do today that will make me feel at like 10% better.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think hope always seems like such a far walk, a far journey to get there. And for somebody who has struggled in the darkness for at least 2 decades myself, there is hope, there is help, and there are so many resources out there and so many people that love and care about you. Um, Today's quote came from the Mind Journal, and it reads, Someone once told me, the child who had to grow up too fast becomes the adult who doesn't know how to rest. They feel guilty slowing down, equate stillness with being unworthy, and only feel valuable when they're doing, because survival taught them love must be earned. But they weren't meant to live in overdrive forever. Rest isn't laziness. It's a return to the self that was never given space just to be.
Yeah, that was good.
I think you know, so often are we so quick to jump to that person's lazy, or that person never does anything, and we don't take a step back to understand why some people are the way that they are. Kind of like you had mentioned, education and empathy go a
Yeah,
long way.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, from myself and for all our listeners, Paula, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today. You've been a lovely guest.
Thank you, Chris. I was glad to be here.
Of course. And for all my listeners, until next time, be gentle with yourselves and much love.